Let me just turn off the transcript. Here we go. So good afternoon. It's really lovely to see some of you, some familiar faces from cohort 1 in the room, but lots and lots of graduates around cohort 2 have begun to onboard. So welcome to you if you're in the room from cohort 2. So I thought, given that, it's probably worth spending a couple of minutes kind of reflecting on the programme in its entirety, and so everyone's kind of up to speed on understanding how the different cohorts of graduates are working and kind of what on earth these learning and development sessions are actually all about. So today's session, we're going to cover a little bit of kind of introductions of who I am and who kind of was going to be speaking today. It'd be nice to kind of cover kind of how everybody's getting on, sort of onboarding onto their councils, onboarding onto your courses. I'm going to give a real kind of light touch overview of the learning and development support that sits alongside the Pathways to Planning graduate programme. And then we're going to go on to the kind of substance of this afternoon's call, which is kind of what to expect from your postgraduate course. And we're joined by Katie, who's an associate professor at UWE in Bristol, who's going to kind of give an overview of the curriculum and kind of just general what can you expect as you start to kind of onboard at your universities or apprenticeships. We're also then going to hear from Andy, Amy and Chloe, who represent Young Planners Officers Society and RTPI Young Planners, to give a bit of an overview around some of the early career networks that are available to planners kind of just starting out. And then, as always with these sessions, lots of times for questions. So as I said, my name is Shelley Rouse. I'm Principal Consultant at the Planning Advisory Service. So I am part of the Pathways to Planning team, but I am the only planner within the Pathways to Planning team. So whilst they sort of run the graduate kind of recruitment and assessment process that you've been through and the lining up with councils, I'm the kind of planning element of the scheme. So it's lovely to kind of meet brand new planners as they start their career journeys as well. And so, as I said, I'm joined today by Katie McClimmet. Katie, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks again, Shelley, for asking me to come on this call. I look forward to talking to you all, both in due course and hopefully in the future as well. I'll say a little bit more about myself when I'm talking about what to expect from postgrad education.
Great. And Andy, I think you've joined the call. Do you want to just say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. And yeah, I'll be outlining later what Young POS is and how to get involved.
Great. And I think Amy and Chloe are going to be joining the call a little bit later. They've got an existing call. So that's kind of who we are on the call, but we'd really like to know kind of who you are and how you're getting on. So if you want to pop your name in the chat and which council you're starting at or have started at, that would be great. So we can kind of see where people are in the world. That would be lovely. So, as I said at the start of the call, we're starting to get to the point where cohort 1 graduates who kind of started earlier on in the programme are now being joined by graduates joining as part of cohort 2. So there's a bit of kind of melding of groups of people, and I just thought it'd be really nice to kind of make sure everybody kind of knows everyone. So a bit of an overview of Pathways. So the graduate scheme launched in July 2023. So it's a relatively kind of brand new graduate scheme. It's funded by central government and it's being run by the Local Government Association and the Planning Advisory Service. So cohort 1 was 28 graduates who have been starting at councils since March this year. And cohort 2 is 61 graduates who are starting at councils kind of around August, September. Some of them I think are maybe not quite yet starting, so maybe starting in a couple of weeks. So there's a kind of 2 waves within 1 year, and you're all going to be starting your postgraduate courses in September, kind of either this week or next week, or you may have a little bit of a later date depending on the university. So you're going to be kind of taking that journey into postgraduate study together. So applications for cohort 3 are going to open up in October. So there's going to be quite a few graduates who are in their final year or may have already graduated that are going to be hitting the apply button in the same way that everyone on the call did in October time. And we're looking to bring on next year another kind of 120 graduates to start by next September as well. So we've got a mixture of kind of cohort 1, cohort 2 today. Cohort 1's grads, you will have had the benefit of having a bit of a welcome session at our London office, and we're hoping to be able to do something similar for cohort 2 as well, to kind of get everyone together and get to know you all a bit better. So a kind of short overview of the type of support that the Local Government Association and the Planning Advisory Service are doing for the graduates. And there's kind of 3 core elements. So most of you will have started or been sent the link to do the e-learning module, and that's a kind of web-based, portal-based e-learning project course that we've kind of designed and set up for you to kind of help deal with the basics and get you ready for that kind of onboarding at a council. We've also got these online events and some in-person away days, and the intention is that both cohort 1 and cohort 2 graduates will kind of begin to access some of these online and in-person away days as they begin to start with councils. And also we're the kind of support at the end of an email. So either my email address or the Pathways email address, we're kind of always here to help with questions or deal with any particular issues you might have. So a short overview of the e-learning package. It's called an Introduction to Planning as a Career. It's an online link. It's around 5 to 7 hours worth of study. We recommend you don't do it all in once. It's designed to be kind of in bite-sized chunks to kind of work your way through. There's lots of activities peppered throughout it to kind of do along the way. And there's an ebook to kind of helps people like me who like to know what's coming to kind of read ahead and know what the course is going to entail before I embark on it. And you can do it once before you've started at a council, or as you start, or kind of again once you've begun to kind of get into the swing of being at work and at a local authority. So in terms of these kind of online events, they're designed to be sort of quite short sort of lunch and learns, and to help tailor kind of learning towards what's happening right now in the world of planning, and to be that kind of middle ground between what you're learning on the job and what you're going to learn in an academic setting. We really like to tailor them to what everybody's kind of dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and we're very welcome to suggestions for future events and topic areas that we can cover. So we've done some earlier in the year, which are all available to watch on our YouTube channel. We've today got the one in September, and the 2 that we've got currently scheduled are a session in November around understanding developer perspectives and developer finance models. And then in December, we're going to do something about a new government initiative of introducing new towns. So a kind of new programme of building towns up and down the country. And we'll keep in touch with all graduates around these online events via the newsletter that's going to be kind of coming out on a monthly basis. And then some in-person events. We are hoping to be able to hold some more. The one that's coming up is on October the 22nd, and that's in Newcastle. Appreciate that regionally we're going to kind of be flying around the country doing these away sessions, so might not be able to get to all of them depending on how you can travel. I know for me, Newcastle's about 5.5 hours on the train, so it's not kind of doable for everyone. But don't worry, we'll definitely be coming to a region near you, and we'll be liaising with your council around if kind of transport costs are making that prohibitive for you to attend. So watch this space for those. And likewise, if you can think of a location that would be easy for lots of you to get to, then please do drop us a line. We're more than happy to kind of flex so that we get lots of you in a room together to meet each other. So I'm going to kind of pause for breath now, and hopefully that was a good overview of kind of what's on offer, and how the scheme fits all together. And I'm now going to hand over to Katie.
Right, thanks, Shelley. I am trying to open presentation. Let me see if it actually comes. I'm going through 2 screens. Sharing. Okay, that doesn't look like that wants to do anything. Very helpful. Give me just 1 second. I will see if I can just share my other screen. It did all look like it would be able to just join directly, but what's happening? Go to that one. Okay, are you getting anything through from me, or are you just getting me?
No, I can see your screen. It's come up now.
Excellent, that's good. Sorry, a bit of a faff. Presenting in Mentimeter because I'm hoping I might get a little bit of interaction from some of the people on the call. It's always a bit hard on a group call with people you don't necessarily know very well. So sometimes Mentimeter works. I've just been with some of my new first year undergraduates who already looked bored to death when we said we were going to use Mentimeter. But well, I haven't got very much to ask you on it. Don't worry. There's no competitive quizzing. And Shelley, you've already taken my question one by asking people's names, but I'll put a slight slant on it to make it a little bit different. So thanks again to Shelley and for Pathways Planning for having me. And hello from me. As I said, I'm Katie McClymont. I'm at UWE in Bristol, where I am the programme leader for both the MSc in Urban Planning, which is the standard face-to-face postgraduate offer we have at UWE, and also for the Chartered Town Planner Apprenticeship. We at UWE offer both entry point 1 and entry point 2. As master's entrance, you're all entry point 2. There's sometimes it's called level 7. There's different language. I think different universities, different people at the same university use as well. So I've got co-program leads on both of those. What we've got at UWE is a way we all kind of have sort of concentric circles. So somebody else sits with the apprenticeship and the undergraduate, and somebody else on the other side with just the masters. So we all link up quite nicely here, I hope anyway, as a planning school. So just by way as a bit of academic background for me, a very long time ago, I did an undergraduate degree in social and political sciences. I then came on to a master's in planning, fully intending to go and actually be a practicing planner, but kind of got a bit stuck in higher education and did a PhD at the University of Sheffield and worked there for a little bit of time. And now I have been at UWE for 15 years now. I've been programme leader for the master's programme for a good while, and the apprenticeship's a bit more recent because the apprenticeship programme itself is a bit more recent as well. So I think largely Shelley has already asked this, but maybe put a bit more about where you're from rather than necessarily your council, because we seem to have a bit of a nice mix. You've got some good few sort of Londoners, a bit of Sheffield appearing there, but maybe just to see if we can get Mentimeter to work on this as part of your learning. So what you need to do, if you haven't already started your course and you haven't had a load of tutors trying to get you to do this, if on either another tab on your laptop or if you've got a phone or something else to hand, if you go to menti.com, literally just put menti.com in there, and it'll ask you for a code. The code should be up there, hopefully visible on your screen. And if you do that, you should then be able to pop some things in and should appear and look quite nice. Excellent, thank you. I'm getting some there as well. Excellent. Hello from South London. Hello, Kate. So you're doing the entirety of sort of the East Coast, or a good amount of the East Coast of England in your sweep there. So crossing the East Anglia County border, that's always a bit of football rivalry. So I hear. Working at Watford from Cornwall. I hope that's not a daily commute, Daisy. That sounds really, really, really long. Okay, Smooth from Leicester, Northamptonshire. I'm not going to be able to read everything out now because you've all worked out how to do this. I'm just, I will scroll some of these up. Shelley to Stockport and Somerset. Got a good, nice range. people from different regions. Some of you look like will have a bit of urban and rural experience of different places from where you've lived as where you are working or where you're maybe living now, which is fantastic. As a postgraduate and a planning educator more widely, getting people to see different bits of the country, I think, is really, really vital. And I imagine that's something that, being on this Pathways scheme, you will, as a community, get to find out so much more about what's going on in other places than maybe if you're coming through a sort of standard entry route. So hello, great to hear from all of you, and thank you for being so sort of nice and interactive and giving little life stories on that. It gets a real nice flavour for who I've got in the room. So this is a very boring slide, but some very good content in it. There's a lot more pictures coming up, so just bear with. So when I was talking to Shelley about this, I didn't want to make this just me talking about what I do at UWE. So my experience is, if I've been at UWE a very long time, I've also external examined at University of Westminster, Sheffield Hallam University, briefly at Anglia Ruskin, and I'm currently an external examiner at the University of Sheffield. So that might be some of your master's courses, your training providers, depending if you're apprentice doing the Pathways Planning via the apprenticeship or via the other setup, there's more standard master's route in there. But I went back to try to find what holds us all together as planning schools, as providers, particularly for apprenticeships, but also for all our accredited planning courses. And I was looking for the learning outcomes that the RTPI, the Royal Town Planning Institute, put out there, which is what we have to map all of our courses against. We've got a lovely complicated diagram. It was much bigger than this, so I've just kind of streamlined down to the core learning outcomes that the RTPI was putting down, and we have to tick off in our modules of when these are introduced, when they're consolidated, and when we think they're fully met. It's actually quite an interesting exercise putting this on start of the academic year. I should have to do this every year because it refocuses the mind on these. I'm not going to read all 13 out now because I'm assuming you can all see them and you can all read as well. The bits that I've highlighted in bold was my going through this and trying to draw out some of the key aspects of these. Some of these are more topic based. We've got things around the implications of climate change. We've got some things around development finance. We've got some things around design. Some things are more sort of like practices. So we've got sort of integrated and well substantiated responses. We've got recognizing the role of communication skills. So across all planning programs and across the different ways that different universities chop these up in modules for this postgraduate planning, will be some emphasis around skills, some emphasis around topics. And my experience is quite often postgrad planning programs can look really, really different. Some people do 30 credit modules like we mainly do here at UWE. Others do 15. Some might even do a mix with some 20 and some 10 and some 0 credit bearing, but you've got to take it in there. But we've all chopped up the way that we want to teach so it meets some of these core requirements, which really focus around enhancing value and well-being for the community, making places better in a very short sort of way. You've got things around the public realm in here, but then also knowing things about sort of legal frameworks, decision-making frameworks around sort of the structures in which planners work and planning operates. So that's again, so it's a little bit dry, but I thought it was quite useful as that sort of core. And I'm not going to sit and go through what all the different courses offer, because that would really be quite dull. I'm going to talk a little bit more about UWE. But first, I wanted to get a bit of a sense of what some people's interests were in the room, because you've got some different things thrown up there, some different things thrown up by those learning outcomes. Hopefully what you should be able to do, if you're still on Mentimeter within this one, is rank these 5 things. I know one of them's other, so that could be a lot more than 5 different things. I've got some core ideas here with bringing in environmental, social and economic, being what I'm sure many of you have heard of about the ideas of different pillars of sustainability or sustainable development, but also what maybe sits slightly outside of that is, well, probably cross cuts with it, but it's ideas around design. But then also I thought some of you might have some other things which you think are not encompassed by any of those. I thought it would be quite an interesting exercise to see where we got to, getting you guys all to vote on that. Okay. That's interesting. If anyone is feeling bold and would like to put in the meeting chat what other is, if you've put that in, please do. That would be really interesting. I'll keep an eye out for that. That's a really interesting set of responses. So with some colleagues here over a few years ago, we've done a bit of research about people coming into planning education and asked similar, not the same, so it's not scientifically accurate or anything like this, about why people wanted to study planning, looking at both undergraduate and postgraduate across all the accredited planning schools. And in that research, what came out much more strongly were the sort of environmental and sustainability issues. So I wonder, as all pathways to planning, local authority, career oriented people in this room, you've got your social issues coming out a little bit higher than that, but I could be just making some assumptions around there. So thanks for that. Thanks for participating. What I did was I did have a list of both all the chartered planning schools and I just felt like I was going slightly word overload. My understanding, and looking at you, Shelley, see if I'm right, is some of you are not on the apprenticeship route, but as we've been moving towards cohort 2, we're going more towards apprentices. Is that right, Shelley?
Yeah, it's quite a mixed bag. I would say for cohort 1, it was almost kind of 70-30, so 70% of people doing the part-time masters, about 30% of people doing the apprenticeship route. But for cohort 2, it's much more kind of 50-50
Right.
split of people doing, yeah, either the MA route or the level 7 apprenticeship. So nice kind of broad mix, I think, within everybody.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I wonder also, looking at the mix of where people are from, our planning schools outside the south seem to be lagging a little bit in getting their apprenticeships on. I was quite surprised. I think I had known this, but coming back to it and looking at the list going, wow, Sheffield Hallam, you've got a nice wide range for your apprenticeship to get in there. So there's 29 accredited schools, some of you beyond lots of the other ones. I just thought it was quite interesting to think about where some of the apprenticeships are, because often that goes hand in hand with the master's course and the master's program. So what I have here is don't worry that that is blurry. That's just, I couldn't get a more sharp picture. It's there as a point of reference, the image that's in the bottom right hand corner. So talking about master's education, postgraduate study, one way I thought that would be quite nice is to bring out some of the differences from between master's study and apprenticeship study. And I'm doing this on the basis of what we offer at UWE. The very short answer is, in terms of study, there's not really very much difference. So there will be more difference between 2 master's courses at 2 different universities than there will between an apprenticeship and a master's course at the same university. I've got the diagram up on the left-hand side. There is how our master's program runs. So as I said, we have big modules. I think most of the places I've examined on have had small modules, and I was a bit like, oh, looks like you're doing a lot more. But then tutors have said, oh, I don't know, we think we have more scope in a bigger module. So I think it doesn't actually make that much difference in terms of my experience. I think the content is covered because you're going up against those learning outcomes from the RTPI. We teach on whole days. So we teach on Thursdays or Fridays generally, a bit of Wednesdays for some of those option modules. And a whole day teaching at UWE looks like you come in at 10 o'clock. There's some bits which are lectures delivered by academic staff. There's some group discussions. Our class sizes are around 40 normally. Goes up, goes down, different years, sometimes how that sits, because we teach full-timers and part-timers at the same time. The full-timers just do this all condensed into one. So they do the things that are on the left-hand column at the same time, and then the things that are on the right-hand column at the same time in 1 year, as opposed to in 2. So our initial module is about plans and the sort of issues around things like transport and infrastructure and strategic planning, and what level do we do planning at. Our second module focuses a lot more around decision making, law, but also design and access statements. We then have the module which grounds you more in sort of the intellectual traditions and some of those sort of key topical questions in planning, which is the second year history and theory. And then we have optional modules. Our optional modules are 15 credits. So students on the masters as opposed to the apprenticeship can take up to 4 option modules. If you're on the apprenticeship, you can only take 2 because you have to take our agency project, which is our work-based learning project. Other students are also able to take that work-based learning project, but that's an option then. Our option modules touch on topics like design, health and planning, community involvement, conservation, and transport. So there's a kind of move from general understandings of the planning system and some of the debates and themes in planning, some of the mechanisms of planning, some of the sort of underpinning arguments and thoughts and topics, to a bit more specialism in the option modules. And then the dissertation and all the agency project is where a bit more specialism can also come into your work. Again, different universities will do this slightly differently. Some may have specific research methods training as part of their dissertation, which is a standalone module, which you get assessed and you get a grade for. Ours is an integrated, it's just the dissertation, but we have those expectations around research methods within that. And that can be generally a topic of your choosing. Sometimes that's scoped with your workplace, sometimes that's scoped with the university, sometimes it's a bit of all of them. Often yourselves, you're in a great position to do a dissertation because you've got a lot of other things going on that's related to planning. You've probably got good contacts, both within your own council, but also now as a network, as people on the pathways. If you want to do a bit of comparative bits, you can go, oh yes, I spotted someone else who was at Sheffield compared to someone that was at Wiltshire, oh, and Stevenage as well. Let's do a comparison. I'm just picking the first names I scrolled onto on the chat there. So for doing that research and making those networks, that can be really, really useful. So the planning masters, in all my experience of both teaching and examining, is quite general, but there is scope to specialise and a scope to pursue your own interests. Through the masters, you will not be taught exactly how to operate the development management system of your council. You will not be taught exactly what is in every single bit of every circular or every local plan, but you will be given the tools to be able to go and find the right things, and then to be able to analyse and understand them and ask some really good questions about them when you get to operating in them. You'll get that wider experience which stands the test of time and isn't just based on a single government or a single minister. We're looking at this again with our first year undergraduates, and quite how many planning ministers have been in the last 10 to 12 years is quite shocking. Really, no consistency there. So that part, that master's education, very much I see it as an education. I see it as part of the RTPI as being a learned profession, being something that speaks to research, which being something that speaks much more widely than just telling what goes on in any day job. Again, from your conversations, you'll learn that different authorities do things quite differently. They've got slightly different sets of cultures, slightly different sets of practice, slightly different sets of software, different ways you chop up a planning department, which will make everything slightly different. So the purpose of that education is to ground that much more, to give that much broader understanding. In terms of an apprenticeship, so here at UE, and talking about that level 7, that entry point 2, that master's level apprenticeship, our apprentices do exactly that same programme that I've got up there, but they also check off with our training managers knowledges, skills and behaviour, and that's what that very blurry web page picture is there. And this is because there's an accelerated route to professional accreditation, which I've got the slightly scary diagram from the RTPI, which I'll flash across your screens next, but I won't dwell on. So I think pathways programme, from my understanding that's growing of it, sits quite nicely in that sort of space between a master's and apprenticeship. It gives you those extra things that maybe sometimes it's the apprentices that are getting, but get that those extra seminars, things like this, those extra networks as well, will kind of make some of those links. And also, I imagine those of you on the apprenticeship route can use these things to draw on your knowledge, skills and behaviour when you're checking those off. Sometimes that is done by a programme leader such as myself. There'll be your training manager as well. At UE it's not. We have a set of people who work in our apprenticeship hub who you would work with as well. So again, exploring some of those differences is quite nice. So that's the slightly scary diagram from the RTPI. If I spend a long time looking at it, I think I can understand it. This is about apprenticeship routes and routes to accreditation, slightly different routes for those of you that are doing the masters, but more widely, there's a sense that your education gives you something, and then you have an assessment of professional competence, which shows how you are applying that, how are you bringing that in on the day job. As apprenticeship providers, we have some further links to get through that assessment of professional competence. As a master's course, you will graduate with your MSc or MA and be eligible to be a licentiate member of the RTPI. Please also stay in touch with your programme leaders and so on, because we're always very happy to support you through less of a formal mechanism, but to make sure you're getting there and getting on with the next goals in your job. Most employers are very geared up to this as well, especially local authorities. Okay, so slightly more interesting slide, been slightly too many words on this. So the sorts of things we do, most of these photos, all of these photos come from master's teaching. I'm trying to work out if one of them I couldn't decide if that was no, I think that is a master's cohort. So these are just me scrolling through my last sort of sets of teaching photos. The top left is probably fairly obvious. It's an in-class based session. That's a sort of UE classroom with a couple of screens, not brilliantly well laid out. I'm probably saying to everybody, can you now reorganize the tables so you can talk to each other? And everybody's looking like, oh, do we have to? Normal sort of thing. That's the sort of cohort, that's the sort of teaching environment. Quite nice. You coming in from the day job, from what you're doing in the other days of the week, depending how yours is chopped up. Doing some learning, got different materials in there. You may be could have been looking at local plans, it could have been looking at conservation area appraisals, looking at some documentation, talking to each other. In what I do and what I've tried to get into some of the programs in UE is a lot of going out and about as much as possible. We can do there. So I have a couple of images, which is from talking to community associations. We're in a former library, and the one you might be able to see the guitars on the picture, hearing from the community organisation that took that on, running that as a community space. Then we're helping out with a sort of information stall and a bit of litter picking for some of our students. If you see the bunting and the bags on the middle left as I'm looking at it. I'm never sure if these reverses things when it's being shown to you. In the middle, I don't know if anyone with any Southwest connections recognises that. It was the installation of a former oil platform at Weston-super-Mare called Sea Monster, which was there a couple of years ago. It was absolutely heaving it down with rain when we went out in our welcome week a few years ago to go and look at that. Really interesting about place, small seaside towns. Notice some of you were probably on the other side on the coast, but those particular problems that associate around what would have been set up as Victorian tourist resorts. How do you make those meaningful? How do you make those interesting? How does art and the arts have a role in any of those sorts of things? The other two photos is the modern housing and that's groups standing around. Those are field trips to Sheffield in different years. A lot of, but not all of, but quite a lot of our students here, and it possibly would be similar, not entirely similar with you guys. You can be a bit regionally focused. So we're very keen, being in the southwest, to get people out to go to Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield. So we do a residential field trip for 3 days out and about visiting different things. And then the final image up that is an exciting project in Bristol of 50 to 60 community-led homes built in association with a housing association, which has just recently come about, and we've gone and visited and explored quite a bit there. So photos really bring out some of the issues that I think postgraduate education in planning dips you into straight away, very, very quickly. My key thing in my induction, which is what I will be doing on Thursday as I'm walking around Bristol city centre with our new intake, is the idea of getting you to think like a planner. That's to go and experience places and ask certain questions about what's going on. Why is it like this? Why did it come about? Could it be different? Whose interests is it serving? How is it working? How isn't it working? What sort of things do we observe that you maybe the casual passerby doesn't? And getting some of those conversations about place, about placemaking, about place quality amongst you guys who are on the courses, amongst us as tutors as well. It's experiencing those things out and about, reading and hearing more about those in the classroom, and hopefully seeing such a range of stuff that you can help develop those interests that you've all already got in this. Okay, I think I have a couple. No, I have this slide, and then I'm going to ask you guys for some questions. One of the other things I think is really important about postgraduate education is kind of two sides. One is the sort of that broad planning education, which you're kind of slightly thrown in at the deep end, experiencing places, learning a whole load of new terminology around decision making, around plan making, etc., and getting that breadth. The other thing is having that space for your depth of your own understanding, your own study, and that is done through option modules, but probably done most through dissertations. And again, they will be done slightly differently, but I don't think at any university I've examined on when I've been looking at dissertations, I've been puzzled by like, oh, that's a weird topic, or oh, why do they do it like that? So again, from my experience, there's normally quite a lot of scope about what you can bring in. The key thing being to independently plan a bit of research project here. So I just had a list of the first few things I looking back down my inbox at a few students over the past few cohorts. The research I do, as you can see, so the people I am likely to get allocated to be the dissertation tutor for is a bit more that sort of social side, a bit more that community involvement side, some of the things around housing, sometimes a bit of things around heritage, some things around off-grid settlements coming in there. There's a lot more, there's a lot of diversity, and I'd say it's never too soon to start thinking about what you're interested in. Don't start going and doing a dissertation when you only had like half a day, but think about that. Think when you're doing things, when you're out and about doing walks, or you've got external speakers coming on, something spark your interest. Something happened at work that's puzzling in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on there? Be aware of that, and be aware that then you can probably become a specialist in that area. You can do some work which might bring about change in practice locally. It might change people's ideas about some issue in planning. Planning is very live, and we learn a lot by researching specifics, I think. Okay, I think I have talked for a while now. I am happy to either get people to speak, or I do have another Mentimeter slide if that's easier. I don't know if you're all in like open plan offices or difficult places to stick your mic on and suddenly be saying a question, what environment you're in. But I'm happy to have any questions or any thoughts about postgrad planning education, really.
Well, I will let people write questions, but picking up on that last slide, I think I already had an idea what I wanted to do my dissertation on before I started, because I was experiencing something at work, and I was like, why is it like this? Why is this happening? So I did my dissertation on whether kind of planning policies had an element of racial discrimination towards gypsies and travellers. And I wasn't the only one. There was lots of dissertations that were kind of submitted to a government body to look at and put policy around that particular community change. So, you can always yeah, don't be afraid to kind of go out there and enable change through your dissertation and through postgraduate study.
That's fantastic. I might have to ask you for a copy of your dissertation, Shelley.
I don't think I've got
Yeah.
a copy. I think it was before the days of Google Drive and
Oh,
SharePoint. It was, I think, a printed document somewhere
and you've
that's
not
lost
got
to
it
the ether.
bound on your bookshelf.
I have, but
Read it out to me. My most recent dissertation supervision with a level 4 apprentice, she's decided she wants to do something about flood risk and gypsy and traveller planning applications in her local authority. So just quite interesting. You said that's what made me, because just talking literally yesterday, conversation on this topic, we were again trying to work through something that she was interested in, but something that was relevant at work as well.
So does anyone, appreciate Katie's given up her time. Does anybody have any questions about the, the the educational adventure they're about to embark on? Also, yeah, excellent. Oh, somebody's.
Oh, that's good. How narrow focus would be permitted for a dissertation? For example, would writing about perceptions of a local building be too niche? Well, my instinct is I don't think it would be. I'm assuming this is probably a slightly more of a statement building than just one of the houses on a large scale housing development or something like that. There's lots of interesting debate, for example, about 20th century heritage, brutalist, modernist heritage, and public perceptions of that would be very interesting. It'd be relevant to policy because it's about what do we choose to conserve, or where do we allow changes on that. Again, I think if that's something that's sparking an interest, I would go with it. Find out other things about public perceptions around different sorts of design and buildings. Talk to your tutors, talk to each other on there. What are some examples of projects and do they replace dissertations? I would say specifically that's a question for your program leader. Some universities, I think, do slightly different routes in their dissertation. They do one which is a more traditional research dissertation when you've read some things and then maybe you've done some interviews and then you've analysed your interviews. Some universities I've come across have done more of a work-based dissertation, but I don't know any of the specifics of those ones. It's just check in there with what's offered, and if there's a slightly, because you might end up with a slightly different output if there is the sort of project report which is more of a work related output. That so the EPA is your endpoint assessment. It's a long way off. It's that's for apprentices only. That's to check you've met the knowledge, skills and behaviours. If you're not starting on an apprenticeship, it's not relevant. If you are just starting on an apprenticeship, it will be relevant. Your training managers, your program leaders will tell you a lot more about that. It's just proving you've met the standards that the apprenticeship wants to get. So again, as I said, the main difference between the apprenticeship and the part-time masters here at UWE is your relationship with your employer. So anyone can do a part-time master's course. You don't have to do that because you're doing the other 4 days in the job. I have one student who's still a bit older than me and I'm in my mid-40s. It always makes me very happy, this. And she's got a small holding and is doing the planning master's part-time, so she has nothing to do with the planning work. She may well go into one afterwards, but she's come from a very different route to do that. I have someone else who's a full-time parent and doing a part-time, so the part-time master's offers just part-time study really. You can do that, of course, with doing those other 4 days or equivalent in a job role. The apprenticeship, it's the way that I think Pathways to Planning makes it a bit different because you've applied for Pathways to Planning. But if you weren't in Pathways to Planning, you just apply directly to a university for a master's. For an apprenticeship, you would get that job role and then apply for an apprenticeship. And it just gives a different route to getting to your chartership for the RTPI. When you're sort of sitting in the classroom being assessed on your modules, no difference whatsoever. Okay. Are we expected to do uni work outside of work hours, or can we do this in the office? That's a very good question.
That's probably a question for me to answer.
Yeah, or you, Shelley. What do you think on that one?
So, councils will be releasing you for the day study to go to university. What they should also be doing is allowing you some time to be doing the university work. So whether that is, reading or, pulling together some scope or some research, there's flexibility to do that in your work hours. There will be some work that you need to do kind of outside of work time. For example, if you need to kind of have some quiet and work at home and work over the weekend to do a dissertation or a little bit of reading or research. I remember cramming for a planning law exam and I just couldn't do that in the office because it needed like weekends and evenings of doing reading. So there's some flexibility. If that is something that you're experiencing as a challenge with your particular council, then that's what the Pathways team are here for. We're here to kind of help councils navigate giving you that flexibility. So yes, councils are kind of expected to give you that day release and also some flexibility around doing some stuff in the office, but potentially some stuff at home as well.
I think that's a really useful answer. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is about dissertations. Can they use secondary research or does it have to be primary? Again, first place to check is with your program leader at your own institution. If you're at UWE and you're asking me that question, I would say yes, you can draw on secondary research, but what it has to be is research as opposed to just a big essay. So, for example, I had a student recently-ish who looked at the different discourses she found in objectors and supporters around a big housing development on a town in North Somerset, and drew out how they imagined the countryside and how they imagined community and things like that. So she didn't interview anyone, she didn't do a survey, she didn't do anything like that. She looked at material that was already out there, but she brought a different lens to it, and that made it research. I imagine that's fairly standard. Again, that's standard over places that I have examined, but always check the requirements of your own modules that you're on your own courses. Could you do a dissertation about a social issue a bit similar to Shelley's, for example, lack of diversity in the planning sector, or should it be on a technical planning topic? I think you could do a dissertation on either topic. Again, still the same health warning, check with your own program leader, but there's a lack of research on the lack of diversity in planning. So yes, please do more research on that would be my position on that. I don't think I've ever had a student suggest anything to me, which I've said, I don't think that's planning. Again, see what your course leader says. It may be sometimes that a bit of research is just really, really quite challenging. So I was talking to a student that was very interested in planning in Brazil and Olympic Games legacy on housing and things like that. I was a bit like, well, but how are you going to actually do any research? Are you going to Brazil? Do you have friends and family who are in Brazil? And she didn't. So there's practicalities that come in there, but I don't think you have to think it has to be on like permitted development rights or something along those lines. Some really interesting dissertations on permitted development, but I don't think there's any formality. Again, check what your course says. The EPA, so that's the endpoint assessment, has got various stages in it. What I would suggest you do, so you have to present sort of that you've met all the learning requirements and knowledge, skills and behaviours for an apprenticeship, and then there is a professional interview. If you want to find out more about that, I think the best place to look is the RTPI's website. They have got lots of recordings of discussions on this, and they also do regular webinars, which gives you a lot more depth about what is expected. That also your program leader or training coordinators will tell you a lot more about that near the time. So you need to prepare evidence, you need to have that evidence there, but then you also need to be able to talk about it as well. Okay, so I am scrolling down. If I miss something, Shelley, say, oh, you've missed that question. Recommendations around time management, competing deadlines at union work. Yes, it's one of the most tricky things. Every year, get my returning part-time students back, and it's like, oh, it's time management, and there seems to be a lot more in the second year, and all of those sorts of things. So I think the most important thing to do is to plan ahead. again, when we're looking at things like dissertations, you will know when that deadline for that dissertation is, or you'll know very soon, probably a couple of years' time for quite a few of you. But when you're coming into that second year, know when that's going to be due. We can do that with each module. Know when a bit of a piece of coursework or whatever is due. Look at when you're really busy. Look at when you're blocked. Try to look sort of maybe probably between now and Christmas is a good time. I'd say for most universities will be running their teaching between now and Christmas. There's likely to be assessments around that sort of Christmas period, and try to block out time in your diary. If you're using an electronic diary and you've got a bit of control over that at work, can you try to put in a few hours, maybe you put in a little bit of time to catch up on university emails or things like that. I think being organized and looking ahead, trying to see, checking with your managers at work, is there some time that's going to be really pressured coming up? Is that a time then that I need to work out that then I need to either do a bit of my uni work sooner, or do I have enough scope to do a bit of that later? Ask tutors, say what's going to be the busiest time. For us, we build quite slowly here. I think we get people sort of trying to get people into the swing of it. We get people coming in from such different experiences and such different backgrounds, home and international, people with no planning experience, people who are on the third year of their apprenticeship because they came in at entry point 1, level 4. It's a real mixed bag of getting people similar. And then it gets a bit busier as we go down nearer towards Christmas.
Yeah, and I think lots of things in planning when you're on the job are around time management and complex project management. So multiple sort of strands and works of projects going on at the same time. So find a tool, find a style that works for you. So I'm a big fan of Google Calendar because I can merge my work calendar and my kind of other stuff that I do that's planning related, that's not quite work, through blogs and videos that I sort of do. So I color coding and a Google Classroom, and then you can turn that into like a Gantt chart that I can kind of have a little to-do list linked to. So find the tool, the software, the thing that works for you.
Yeah, no, totally. There's not one way. I have discussions with this about colleagues. We go, I've got my paper to-do list, or I've got my online. No, that wasn't working. Shifting around these sorts of things. So try out a few things. See what if you've got mentors, etc. at work, who and what's useful. Also at uni, ask people, ask your tutors. Maybe find out if they think you're spending far too much time preparing for sessions, or not enough time, because you go there and you're a bit like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. But sometimes students will want to do and know everything immediately, and you just maybe need a bit of reassurance from a tutor, like, no, we will get to that. We'll get to that one in week 5. We'll get to that one in week 6. Just do what's been allocated rather than worrying maybe about some things which are coming in the future.
So Katie, I can see one last question that's probably more for me. How much time should my council be giving me per week to do uni work on average? So the requirement from the Pathways programme is that they give you the time off to attend the course. And as Katie said, that's normally a kind of one whole day per week. It's going to be very dependent on the amount of uni work you've got. As Katie said, they kind of at UWE that kind of ramps up. There's going to be ebbs and flows, I would have thought, of what kind of homework or uni work there is going to be. I think councils aren't going to be able to give you 100% time to do, or time to do 100% of that at work, but it's going to be flexible based on what you've got on at the moment on the job front and what kind of work there is at the uni front, and it's going to be a bit of kind of give and take. But yeah, I don't know, kind of on average, what's the homework?
I would say there's normally an expectation roughly goes out to reading an article or something. So maybe reading 15 pages, that would be probably a slightly longer one. Sometimes it's less than that, sometimes it's more than that. And then there will be periods without teaching, periods when you're not expected to be coming up onto campus. And again, it's trying to make the most of some of those time, or to be to your employer, well, I'm going to be around a lot more at that point. So be nice to me when it's near assessment periods, and then they will be getting more from you as a member of staff when they're not you're not onto those sorts of deadlines. I'm probably taking too long. I'm just going to very quickly speak because I don't want to miss anyone's question out about becoming chartered for doing the part-time masters as opposed to the apprenticeship. So you will graduate with a qualification which has been accredited by the Royal Town Planning Institute, which means you can be a licentiate, which was a tricky word to say, member of the RTPI, which means you've got all the academic qualifications, you need to get the practice qualifications.
Yeah.
So it's normally 2 years from that point onwards in which you log your continuing professional development to then have your professional competency assessed. I don't know if Shelley, have you got particular things set up for this,
I think
as pathways?
That segues very nicely onto Amy and Chloe, who are going to kind of talk to us a little bit more about the licentiate route and their sort of experiences, and then leading on to kind of RTPI young planners. So thank you very much, Katie. I appreciate you're super busy. So we won't be offended if you kind of have to dip off the call. And if anyone has any further questions, then I'll kind of try and get answers at a later date. But thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Shelley. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. So we're going to hear now from Amy and Chloe.
Hi, Shelley.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
Good stuff. I'll just share my screen and get the presentation up. Hi, Chloe, as well.
Hi.
2 seconds.
And I'm sure Amy and Chloe, having more recently navigated the doing uni work balance, you might be able to, I suppose, give some reassurance that most councils are pretty flexible, but 100% of doing it in work hours, yeah, we're not going to get to quite that.
Of course. Yes, thank you, Shelley. So thanks for the invite today to speak to the Pathways to Planning students. I hope you're all having a good week so far. My name is Amy Ingle. I'm a chartered town planner and I work at Richmond and Wandsworth councils as a senior policy planner. Chloe, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chloe Selwood. I am a chartered planner as well, and I work for London Borough of Newham. I'm a principal planner and I work in planning enforcement, but also on application assessments in DM work as well.
Thanks, Chloe. So we're here today to tell you a little bit about the RTPI. Me and Chloe are both on the Young Planners Committee in London. So that's kind of our role with the RTPI. We don't work for the RTPI, it is just on a voluntary basis. So the presentation today is just going to take a look at our planning careers and our journeys. So how me and Chloe got into planning and where we are now. We'll also give some top tips. So for the stage that you guys are at in your career, we'll talk a little bit about what we would recommend that you start thinking about. We'll talk about the RTPI near you. So if you are based in London, we can tell you a little bit about the Young Planners Committee in London. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A as well. So this is me. And I'll tell you a little bit about my career so far. So I did a degree it was called the M Plan in urban planning. So that was an integrated masters. I did that at Newcastle University. So because that was an integrated masters, it meant I did 3 years of undergraduate study and then took a year out. So you can see here, I went to the East Riding of Yorkshire Council and worked there for a year, and then returned back to university in 2020 to complete my final year of the integrated masters. In terms of work experience that I did during university, I spent some time at DLP, which is a planning consultancy. I went and had a week with them in Sheffield, I think. This is quite a long time ago, actually. I also did some work experience with National Highways and the Environment Agency too, so just to get a different perspective on planning in different organisations. So like I said, my first job was at the East Riding of Yorkshire Council, where I was a planning assistant. So on the next slide, I'll go into a bit more detail about what I actually did at East Riding and Arra and Richmond, where I am now. I did my APC. I passed that just last year in 2023. I will say now that I didn't pass my APC first time. I don't think many people do. And at the time I was really disappointed about it, and I wish that somebody would have sort of emphasised how uncommon it is to pass it the first time. I think it's like a 30% pass rate. So I just wanted to get that in there now, just about the APC. And yeah, my current role, like I said, senior planner at Richmond and Wandsworth councils. And then at the bottom here, you can see sort of a little timeline of my degree and then my path to where I am now. So in terms of things that I've worked on so far in my career, so when I was at the East Riding of Yorkshire Council, I split my time between development management and policy. So that year out was a really good opportunity to get to see two different sides of planning whilst working in a local authority, because I know most people would just work in either planning policy or development management. So I really enjoyed that part of it. I worked in the strategic development management team. So it was all kind of like infrastructure projects and like large scale residential projects that I was processing. One of the most exciting projects I was involved in while I was at East Riding was the Dogger Bank Wind Farm, if you've heard of it. So that's a DCO, or a development consent order. And I was responsible for discharging the conditions for that DCO, or requirements, sorry, not conditions on a DCO, while I was there. And then in the policy team, I also was responsible for helping out with the local plan production at East Riding and helping out with the evidence base as well. And then part of my role in the policy team, and also this kind of crossed over into my university work, where we did a independent research project. So I chose to do mine on Section 106 review mechanisms for affordable housing, which I'm sure for some of you will be sounding really dull, but I thought it was super exciting and really interesting part of planning. And then when I was at Arup, I worked on HS2, on the infrastructure consenting. So if you are based in London or familiar with London, I was working on the Euston Portal Head House. So that's basically like a big box near Euston Station. And it's basically part of the HS2 rail line for people to get in and out for like emergency access if something was to happen on the underground part of the route. So that was really good. Again, consenting under a hybrid bill. So more large scale infrastructure projects. At Arup, I was also working on greenbelt assessments. So again, evidence-based documents for local authority clients, their local plans. I worked on climate change policy, and I also got involved in a really interesting project for St Helier Council in Jersey. So that was really interesting because it was obviously island planning. It's a really, really tiny island in the Channel, sort of the Channel Island area. And that was just like nothing else I've ever worked on in my life. That was really interesting. Did some policy baselining for them. And now I'm at Richmond and Wandsworth councils. So working on both local plans there. It's very exciting that you get to work in two different boroughs at the same time, two very different boroughs. We are currently doing a partial review in Wandsworth of the local plan, looking at affordable housing policy and trying to boost the amount of affordable housing that we can get from developers in the borough. And I'm also working on the Clapham Junction master plan as well at Richmond and Wandsworth. Hand over to Chloe.
Thanks, Amy. So my route into planning and my degree and stuff was slightly different from Amy's because I didn't know that I wanted to work in planning at the time that I applied at uni. So I did geography and international relations for my undergrad at Oxford Brookes University because I enjoyed geography, and that was simply the basis for picking geography at that point, and then assumed that at some point I'd figure out from there what I wanted to do after that. Finished there in 2017, was adamant that I didn't want to do a master's and just wanted to go straight into work, and that I was not going to kind of bother with any further education because I'd kind of got my undergrad and that was it. And I was lucky enough to get the graduate planner role at the London Borough of Newham from September 2017. So that kind of finished off my last year of uni and then straight into work nicely. And I kind of only found the planning job with Newham because I was kind of searching geography related jobs, graduate level kind of thing. It wasn't even at that point that I knew that I specifically wanted to work in planning or anything like that. So kind of fell into that role, but loved it. Realised quite early on that I loved the planning role that I'd got, and knew that there was a couple of people who had started part-time masters in planning alongside their work at Newham at various different planning universities in London. So there was some at Westminster, some at South Bank and some at UCL. So I knew that there was kind of the option of that. Didn't go into that straight away, and then a couple of years later, 2019, started at UCL to do my master's part-time. So I did that over 2 years, 1 day a week, and then have stayed at Newham the whole time working while I did that, graduated, carried on at Newham, and then also decided to do my chartership in 2023 and passed December last year. So yeah, it's kind of more succinct and more indirect than Amy's route into planning, but just another example of how you can kind of go from being kind of at entry level to where we are now. And then Amy, if you move on to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, I've worked at Newham for my whole of my planning career. So, but I have been lucky enough to work on different projects and in different teams. So when I started, my graduate role was in the development management team, working on planning applications, and kind of started with lawful development certificates and very small householder applications. And then a short while into that, I think, so I started in September. By December, there was a permanent position available in the enforcement team, and obviously because my graduate role was like a 1-year temporary contract, decided to apply for the permanent position in the enforcement team so that I could stay at Newham, get more experience in a different part of the planning process. So I moved to the enforcement team in December 2017, and then have worked there since then and have kind of progressed in the enforcement team, but I still work on planning applications related to enforcement cases, and I also, now that I'm a principal planner, kind of sign off some of the planning applications for the applications team as well. But while I've been there, I've worked on kind of a whole range of different projects because of the nature of enforcement work. So when you're in a development management team, often it's either like a minor or a major or strategic team. So you're kind of more focused on either kind of smaller applications or much larger infrastructure projects. Whereas with enforcement matters, because the enforcement process relates obviously to all applications and to all development, we kind of get a whole mix of stuff come to us. So I've worked on a big industrial waste site for RMS, which had enforcement and application parts to it. I had to take the application to committee, and as well as work out the enforcement implications for that. I've taken enforcement cases to court for prosecution. Recently secured like a quadruple prosecution against one landlord, which was a huge success for us. I work with the licensing and trading standards teams on kind of joint enforcement task projects within Newham, so that we can kind of share intel on things like shisha and brothel premises within Newham. I've given pre-app and application advice on minor development schemes, so anything up to like 9 units in Newham, for housing sites that may also involve mixed use stuff with commercial units as well. And then, as I say, yeah, the enforcement work kind of comprises a bit of everything, anything that comes our way or another team can't work it out, so they ask for us for advice on the kind of the minutiae of the planning law side of things as well. So yeah, it's been quite a skill set that I've built, considering that I didn't know at the start that I even ever wanted to go into planning at the point that I was applying for university. Next slide, Amy. Thank you. So to just introduce the RTPI, the Royal Town Planning Institute is kind of the national board for chartered planners, and kind of represents planning to government. You can become a member of the institute by becoming a chartered member, which you do through kind of a practical experience application, and yeah, that's. Sorry, my thing's just frozen. Just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, I think that's everything for the time being that we wanted to introduce, and then we can go into more bits.
Can you see my screen? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Go on.
So the question of what you can do with a planning degree is kind of an open-ended question, because there are so many aspects to working in planning that even myself will never experience, or one person maybe in a planning job for their whole life, and there's a whole world of other things that you'll never come across. If you work particularly in city planning, then like the more rural planning side of things you'll never experience. If you work for a private sector company, you may never experience, like I say, the planning law side of things. If you're working on behalf of clients, you may work, conversely, you may be a planning lawyer and therefore not experience submitting applications, either assessing them or submitting them on behalf of clients. So it's something that's kind of, it incorporates so many aspects of work and of the environment, both rural and urban, that you never think at any point, either now in the start of your career or any other point, that what you're doing is kind of pinpointed on that, because even if you had a real interest in planning, there would always be scope to get experience in another area, or to move to another area, or to try something else, even just on a kind of a contracting or temporary basis. As I say, there's the local government side of things if you're wanting public sector, or private sector side of things if you're wanting to make the change between the two. And we've had people come from Newham and go to the private sector, and vice versa. It's very common for that to happen. So don't feel if you've started in the public sector now that that's what you're going to be pinned to for the rest of your career, because absolutely there's complete interchange, and people go to one side and then decide it's not for them and come back. People go and love it and never come back, and vice versa. So it's really not something that kind of you're stuck to. And because of that, planners are known by many names, as I see on the slide, kind of city planners, urban planners, town planners. Someone asks you what you do for a living, you're never quite sure which one to say, because some people might have heard of an urban planner or a city planner, but if you say town planning, they look at you as if you're mad and they've never heard of it, even though it's kind of to you the same thing and quite clearly linked. But yeah, and then aside from that, there's also the aspect of other companies that need planners on their team. So ecological consultants and things like that will always have a planner in their team as well, to work with planning applications and work as the consultee kind of person between the applicant and perhaps the ecologist on their team who is undertaking the surveys and things like that. So yeah, there's lots to get involved in if you're wanting a career in planning, and lots of opportunities.
Okay, so thanks, Chloe. I'm now going to talk a little bit about what the RCPI actually does. So the Royal Town Planning Institute, I think Chloe mentioned this, but it's the UK's leading body representing town planners, the largest body doing so in Europe. We've got over 25,000 members, and we've also got members in over 80 countries around the world. So we are an international institute, despite being the Royal Town Planning Institute and based in the UK. And if you do choose to get involved with the RTPI, we do have separate networks for people who are interested in the more international side of things. And that's a really great opportunity to build your network on an international basis. We hear about job opportunities abroad and things like that, because there's a lot of countries with similar planning system to the UK where you may choose to work later in your career. We are a chartered institute, so we've got the Royal Charter. We're responsible for maintaining the professional standards and accrediting world-class planning courses nationally and internationally. So you're all on accredited courses, that's right, isn't it, Shelley? Yeah. So the RTPI has been involved in shaping your curriculums and your courses to make sure it's up to date and linked to what planners are doing in the real world right now. The RTPI is also a charity. So the purpose of the Institute is also to advance the science and art of planning for the benefit of the wider public. We lead policy debates, we set a research agenda for the planning profession. And you'll see on the website as well, if you've had a chance to explore on there, we've got lots of different research papers and things like that that the Institute put out. And we do have researchers working for the RTPI full time as well, who focus on things like that. And the RTPI do also collaborate with different companies to produce those research documents also. So to do all this, we need to be representative of our members. So we're listening to members all the time about what they want to see from the Institute, about what's important to them, about what issues they're facing in the planning industry, so that we know where to direct these resources to. And as such, we can promote the value of good planning in the UK. And I would say that the more you, like, this is all very overwhelming, like what's on the screen, there's so many different things that the RTPI does. But I would say that the earlier you can get involved, or the more you can get involved as well, the more you will get out of it. I know that through my involvement with the RTPI, I've built a really huge network. Actually, I know so many people in planning, especially just within London, because that's where I'm based, and I just wouldn't have met that many different people had I not been involved in the institute. So that's just one of the benefits. We'll go on to look at some of the other benefits as well. So obviously, as students, I believe you get free membership. Is that right, Shelley? Because although you are working, you're still students, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you are on accredited courses, so you should have free student membership, and hopefully your university should tell you how to get that sorted out. But I would say do get signed up and create your account and everything as soon as you can. Get your membership number and get yourself all set up on there, so that you can start using all the resources that we offer. Benefits to membership include access to the resources that we were just talking about. So research, obviously, for your university, and you're writing dissertations and essays, you can use all of our resources there. And you also get a free subscription to the Planner magazine as well. So that's a really great resource. It has lots of sort of current planning affairs. It has different stories of what's going on. Good way to keep up with what's going on with legislation and policy as well nationally. Through membership, you also get access to local networks. So like I just mentioned, the London Young Planners Network is one of those. But if you are based outside of London, you will have a, thank you, Beba, I've just seen you put something on the chat. Yeah, you will have access to all the different networks. So that's not just Young Planners either. So I mentioned the international network. There's also like Transport Planners Network. If you're more interested in transport planning, there's I think there's a policy network, there's an enforcement network, isn't there, Chloe, as well? So there's different networks for all areas of planning. So it's a really great way to find people who are interested in the same things as you. Members also get access to our TPI Learn. So we've got like a whole e-learning thing online. That's really handy if you wanted to get involved in that alongside your studies and your work. You also get access to training and CPD opportunities. So that is on a national scale and a regional scale. Most of the CPD that we put on in London is for young planners anyway, is free. We try to keep it free because you're young planners, you're not earning big bucks yet. So we want to make them as accessible as possible. So do look out for those. And we also run like networking events as well. So we try to do those quarterly in London. I'm not sure what the other regions do, but they're also a great way to meet other people within the network and make connections with people, hang out with other planners, which is always fun. And you also get all sorts of different help and support with becoming a chartered member if that's something you decide to do in your career. So we run APC events. So if you're doing like your logbook, which I know is becoming obsolete next year, but all the other different parts of your APC, you can get support there. And I think as well, actually, you do get discount and stuff too. So you have to log in. But there's like a whole discounts page, I think, and I think being students as well, you might get like more money off like iPads and like laptops and things like that. But do check it out; it's quite good. So I'll just run through the licentiate route to becoming a chartered member of the RTPI, because that's the route that I undertook. So as a student, I presume this is where you guys all are. You haven't done planning degrees before, so you'll come out from being a student with a fully RTPI accredited degree, and then you'll start the licentiate route. So you'll have to change your membership class. So like I said, you've got your free student membership now. You'll need to change that to the licentiate membership class. I think it's about £79 when I paid for it for the year. Some councils and some firms will pay that for you. But I definitely recommend when you're moving around jobs, that's something that you look for, because once you're chartered, I think it's over £300. So it's obviously a really big bonus if where you work will pay for it. The council where I work does pay for it, so I'm quite lucky. And then you need a minimum of 1 to 2 years, so minimum 1 year, working as a licentiate before you can then start moving through the LAPC route and doing your different doing all the different documents that you need to produce. So when I did it, it was the reflective journal, which I don't think you'll have to do by the time it comes around. The statement of professional competence, and a like an experience statement. So that was just basically setting out what you've actually done, what you've been involved in during your time at different jobs, and then the longer one that delves more into how the work that you've done links with the key competencies that the RTPI has, and that all feeds into sort of this role of the Institute of upholding professional standards and just making sure that the people that are gaining chartered membership are undertaking their work in line with those values. I'll hand over to Chloe now, who's going to talk about the experienced practitioner route.
Shelley, I've just seen your email. Do you want to do these or do you want to skip through these?
Yeah, I wonder, because we're up against time, and obviously doing APC might be about 3 years down the line for people on the call. I think if we could skip to the career advice and the RTPI near you, and we can obviously kind of share the links with people on the call in an email afterwards.
Yep, we'll do APC. Do you want us to still do APC top tips or just career advice?
I think career advice. Yeah.
We'll skip to that one. Chloe, do you want to kick off?
Sure. So the main point on here for me was to maintain an interest in the wider world of planning, particularly as you start your masters. It was very easy when you're kind of in your world of work, in your local authority, to just think that the world of planning starts and ends with that kind of work. And as I said in the slide earlier on, there's so many things and so many jobs related to planning as a whole, that having that wider interest, whether you listen to planning podcasts or read things in the Planner Journal or whatever it is, just have some kind of wider interest and continued understanding and development of national legislation and things, because particularly if you work in a local authority, yes, you'll be trained on that stuff when it becomes relevant, but you don't necessarily get kind of ahead of the curve information, just because there simply isn't time and resource to do so. So kind of having that level of the bigger picture and why you're actually doing kind of your part of the planning role is really important. And that's something that I've definitely come to appreciate more as I've advanced more in my career.
I could talk about a couple of the others. So I think I've already covered this, but I think building your network is very important. So just trying to get involved in things outside of work, because I think you end up in a bit of a silo, you get in a bit of a bubble when you just go into work and hearing the people you work with every single day. So building your network and engaging with things like RTPI, CPD and that sort of thing is so important, because you get to hear what's going on, especially if you work in the public sector. You get to hear what's going on in the private sector. If you work in the private sector, you get to hear what's going on in the public sector, because otherwise you do end up just in a silo and you don't get that respect for what's going on in the wider industry. Work experience, I mean, I don't think this is as relevant for you guys because you'll be working the whole time that you're sort of doing your part-time degree, but it is very important. And I think a top tip that I would recommend doing is every time you finish something or you get involved in a new task, sort of, I use OneNote for this, but keep a note of everything that you do, because it's so useful for when you come up to like job interviews, or when you are, I don't know, with the Pathways to Planning scheme, maybe you have like evaluations and things like that. But it's just so useful because when you look back and reflect on it, you're like, oh my God, I've actually done so much this year. And if you don't write those things down, you just end up forgetting, and it all kind of amalgamates into your everyday job. So do write things down that you're proud of. Keep your good feedback to reflect on as well, because it's great for applying for jobs. Chloe, do you want to talk about graduate roles?
Yeah, I definitely apply early, getting there ahead of the curve with everyone else, particularly if it's after your current job that you're doing with Pathways with. If you wanted to then go kind of swap and go into the private sector, and you wouldn't have had the experience of that side, give a graduate job a go. I've got friends that have gone from kind of senior planner roles at Newham that have gone for graduate roles at private sector companies, just because that was kind of the equivalent level when you've not got the experience of that side of the process. And yeah, it's useful to have the network that Amy's just spoken about if you're then going into applying for those roles, and you can kind of meet other people, other young planners that may have been in those graduate schemes the year before you or 2 years before you at kind of young planner events and things like that.
Yeah, I think building your network is one of the key things. So obviously we'll be sharing links to the RTPI kind of young planners networks that are across the regions with everybody on the call and through the Pathways newsletter, but also things such as the BAME Planners Network, Planning Out, and Women in Planning. There's loads of networks out there that can just be the go-to place to bounce ideas off, meet other people either in your area or in your specialism, and it's really important to kind of have that network of planning buddies, and hopefully some people on the call will you'll be able to see them at your next RTPI Young Planners event, so we'll share the link. I'm appreciative of time. I'm happy to kind of roll on and bring Andy in, and if anyone's got any kind of questions, then we can kind of put them in the chat and I can feed them back to you at a later date. I appreciate you've probably got other meetings to get to.
Yes, I need to pop off now, but thank you everyone. Hope that was helpful.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi Andy, I appreciate you're a bit squeezed at the end, but I'm happy to go past the time and give you enough time.
No, I'll do a whistle stop tour. I haven't got many slides, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's great. We can see them.
Yep, perfect. Good. So yes, hi everyone. My name's Andy and I'm Development Manager at Suffolk County Council, and I'm also the National Chairman of the Young Planning Officer Society Network. So I'm just going to run you through kind of briefly, bit like the previous presentation, of my career so far, my experiences, and then a bit on the Planning Officer Society and Young POS. So, how did I get into planning? I've only ever worked at Suffolk County Council, so I joined Suffolk County Council in 2016. I joined as part of the Planning Technician Apprenticeship through the RTPI, and so I joined that's at A-level kind of equivalent stage. So I joined fresh out of college and done a 2-year RTPI planning technician course, which was really good. It helped me get to grips with the back office operating systems, learning the planning process that way, seeing consultation responses come through, seeing objections come through, and once I'd finished that, I was able to move into a planning officer role, and at the same time, I undertook my undergraduate degree at London South Bank University part-time, so that was funded through Suffolk County Council. So I've done that part-time for 4 years. So lots of commuting down to London 1 day a week, and work-life balance, caseload balance, in development management. Also, whilst I was still doing that, I then moved into a senior planning officer role for a couple of months, and then into the development manager role, which I'm currently in. So I currently manage the DM team and monitoring enforcement functions for Suffolk County. So yeah, in terms of education, I done urban environmental planning at London South Bank. Just an idea of some of the projects which I've been able to work on since I've been at the council. So when I first joined, I was in that technician apprentice role, but I was able to get engaged with helping in reviewing our local plan. So it was our first joint minerals and waste local plan. So for those that you don't know, Suffolk is a 2-tier area, meaning you have district and borough councils who deal with things like housing and commercial activities, and then you have the county council who deal with minerals waste and what's known as Regulation 3 development. So Regulation 3 developments like new schools, new roads, which are done by the Highway Authority, fire stations, all kind of county council funded projects. So I was able to get involved with the minerals waste local plan, done lots of planning applications, new schools, 1,000 place high school. I'm currently dealing with some new dual carriageway to the A12, just north of Ipswich. Standard waste sites, landfills, energy from waste, quarries, sand and gravel. And then often, if you're the case officer for somebody's application and you get an appeal, you get dragged into the appeal as well, which is all good learning. I've also been involved in some nationally significant infrastructure projects. Probably the most notable there, I'm currently working on Sizewell C nuclear power station. So that's discharge requirements, as Amy mentioned earlier, that she done for some offshore wind farms. And then I've also been involved in all the way up to examination stage on 5 estuaries and North Wales offshore wind farms. So a really quite varied journey, and probably a journey that a lot of you will experience in terms of being new to a council, undertaking education at the same time, balancing it, and trying to be helpful with, other people you know in a job, and trying to broaden your horizons. So what is the Planning Officer Society? So the Planning Officer Society represents around 2,000 individual planners in England, and so there's an 80% coverage of local authorities and public sector organisations. So it's pretty much mostly local authority planners, but there are public sector organisations like LGA, and if you are a lecturer, for example, at university, you can still be a member of the Planning Officer Society. And so the organisation's there to support planners at any stage in their career in the public sector, promote best practice in planning, and also a bit of a think tank, and certainly an active lobbying group for excellence in planning practice and government reforms, feeding into government consultations kind of at the highest level. There's a variety of networks which are available, a bit like the RTPI. We've got a spatial planning network, development management, there are regional networks. So I know there's a POS London network, there's a POS West Mids again, which is getting up and running. We have the Young POS network, and then there are subject specialists as well. So you often get hotspots throughout the country for different things. Suffolk East Anglia has kind of experienced a lot of nationally significant infrastructure projects, and the subject specialist for that is Philip Ridley. He's head of NSIPs at East Suffolk Council, which has Sizewell and lots of offshore wind farms. So there's also that little network there. So just on Young POS, we're here to support early year professionals like yourselves, and it also extends out to those who have graduated, and so you're eligible for Young POS for up to 10 years post-qualification experience. So if you guys, if you're doing 2-year course, you'll be eligible to join now, and you can stay for 10 years after you finish. And the idea is that it's a network and a safe space for local government planners to speak their minds, maybe away from the RTPI, which also has private sector planners in, share maybe issues and knowledge you're having maybe with politicians or dealing with certain external organisations like the Environment Agency, Natural England. So it's meant to be a really safe space where anyone in the public sector can come along and have a chat. And we also run events. So we're running an event tomorrow, actually virtually, which if people want it, I can circulate a link to. And that's with a chap from from Warwick, I think, and he has gone from being a planner, and he's gone all the way up, and he's now chief exec of a council. So it's following his journey, asking questions. It's kind of reflecting on what he's been up to, and so that's the sort of thing we do. We're here to complement the RTPI, work with the RTPI, but also be separate from them and have our own little space. So, I mean, that's a whistle-stop tour of what POS is, what the Planning Officer Society is, kind of challenges and different projects I've been involved in. So I think that was probably short and sweet, and we've not overran too much for now, Shelley.
That's great, Kat. Thanks.